that there were a total of 26 confidential human sources in the crowd that day.
Sandra, 3 of those were authorized and tasked by the FBI to be there on January 6, 2021. We're coming up on 4 years since that day of the Capitol riot. This IG report specifically focuses on the FBI's handling of confidential human sources, or as we know them, FBI informants. For years, the outgoing FBI director, Chris Wray, has been pressed on reports of undercover agents. According to this new report, there were no undercover FBI agents. However, there were 3 confidential human sources tasked by the Bureau to be in the crowd on January 6th to specifically watch what the report states is concerns over domestic terrorism. Out of those 3, Sandra and John, 1 entered the Capitol, 2 others entered a restricted area. The report says the FBI did not encourage or authorize any sources to go into the building or a restricted area. In addition to the 3 confidential human sources, the FBI told there were 23 that were there on their own. Now, they had worked with the FBI in the past on other cases, but not specifically on the January 6th rally. Some of them entered a restricted area as well. And what stands out in this report, John and Sandra, none of the confidential human sources that entered the U.S. Capitol or a restricted area were prosecuted by the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. Remember, this is an office that is still arresting nearly 4 years later and prosecuting people with this case. Now, in a response to the Inspector General, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office says the following. The D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office generally has not charged those individuals whose only crime on January 6, 2021 was to enter the restricted grounds surrounding the Capitol, which has resulted in the office declining to charge hundreds of individuals, and we have treated the confidential human sources as consistent with this approach. Outgoing FBI Director Christopher Wray, who announced that he would be stepping down in the next few weeks yesterday, has been pressed on the FBI's role on January 6. Here's just one clip from last year.
If you are asking whether the violence at the Capitol on January 6 was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources and or agents, the answer is emphatically
You're saying
not.
no?
No.
You're saying no?
Not
Okay.
violence orchestrated
Let's
by
move
FBI
on.
sources or agents.
Confidential human sources tasked by the FBI are not undercover agents. These are people that belong to groups like, for instance, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and then became paid FBI informants at certain points in time while still being members of their groups. And of course, John and Sandra, others are not part of any group and just decided to show up to the Capitol for whatever reason and still work with the FBI on the side and provide information. And we're, of course, waiting for more information from Capitol Hill to see if the White House has anything, the Department of Justice, the FBI, as this report just breaking now with the Inspector
technology. But what you see in this report is just a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of sort of hang-ups, and a lot of issues with just doing that basic step. And the basic step language there is actually from the Deputy Director of the FBI, who said that that was a basic step that should have been taken and that he would have expected to have been taken in the lead up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Chris.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we understand what else in terms of this so-called Fedsurrection theory that has been growing among Trump supporters, they are suggesting, not the report suggesting, but that it was instigated from the inside. And explain the difference, if you will, between informants and insiders, and why this has become such an issue.
Yeah, as soon as I saw the numbers that were reflected in the report, I just think that this is definitely something that we're going to see a lot of the right-wing media run with. Because while there were no undercover FBI informants in the crowd, that's something that the report says explicitly. They found no evidence of any undercover FBI agents in the crowd, in the Capitol, et cetera, during the attack. What there were about 26 individuals in D.C. who were confidential human sources for the FBI. Now, that sounds like a big number off the bat, but let's shrink that down, because what you're actually talking about here is a much smaller cohort of individuals who are actually there because the FBI asked them to go to D.C. because they are following a domestic terrorism suspect. That's in the single digits. I believe 3 were actually in that category. So what you're talking about here is a lot of people who just went on their own because they were fans of Donald Trump, or for whatever reason. This wasn't something that the FBI was asking them to do. But that number is certainly going to raise a lot of concerns, I think, on the right, and that's that's something that we've seen some Republicans in Congress really zero in on, this notion that this was all driven by these confidential human sources. And to be clear, what they say is that there's zero evidence whatsoever that any of these individuals, who even those who did enter the Capitol, were being instructed to do anything by the FBI. That was just something that they did on their own. We already knew that one of the individuals who testified in the Proud Boys trial had actually entered into the Capitol and hasn't been charged. But none of the 4 individuals who are believed to have actually entered the Capitol have been charged, nor have I believe it's 13 people who are on the restricted grounds of the Capitol. But neither were hundreds, if not thousands, of others who were on the restricted grounds of the Capitol that day. So that's not quite unusual.
Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz confirmed the FBI used undercover sources as part of its response to the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot.
Do you have evidence of the number of confidential human sources that were operating on the Capitol grounds on January 6th?
Our report will include the information in that regard.
Horowitz said in the long-awaited 84-page report, while no official FBI agents were present during the Capitol riot, 26 FBI sources, most of whom were unpaid, were in Washington for the riot. Some of them were embedded among rioters in restricted areas, and 4 FBI sources also entered the Capitol with them. The FBI did not authorize any of those undercover, known as confidential human sources, to enter the Capitol or otherwise break the law. Horowitz says FBI sources who entered the restricted areas have not faced any charges to date. The DOJ has charged more than